Sometimes, even the best games don't get to bask in that Game of the Year spotlight. Yeah, the winners are usually great, no complaints there, but it always stings a little when a personal favorite slips under the radar. The emotional roller coaster, the innovations, the unique experiences, some of these games should have won. But hey, we're here to celebrate the ones that might not have taken the top prize, but still left a massive impact. Let's jump right into it.
So we're gonna have to move fast. Now I'm going down there alone.
Nate.
Wait, just listen. You never listen. Meanwhile, you're gonna go over there, snag it.
Okay, so Uncharted 2. This game was the action blockbuster in video game form, period. Nathan Drake's second adventure really upped everything. Story, set pieces, the humor. Sure, Uncharted 2 grabbed its handful of awards, but when it came to the official VGA Game of the Year, it went home empty-handed to Dragon Age Origins. Now, don't get me wrong, Dragon Age laid down classic RPG storylines with player choices that altered the world. It's the kind of game you could sink hours into, but Uncharted 2? It was more like being sucked into this high-speed thrill ride with no time to catch your breath. There was this balance of cheeky, flirty dialogue with seriously intense adventure moments that felt like something out of a perfect Hollywood pulp movie. And it had Elena and Chloe. That dynamic alone deserved its own spin-off. Dragon Age ruled the RPG space that year, but Uncharted 2 made as big a dent in shaping cinematic gaming experiences. To me, this is the game that launched Nathan Drake from a cool treasure hunter to a legend in gaming. That VGA? I mean, could it have shared its moment with Origins? Just maybe.
What are you looking at?
The man whose day I'm about to ruin.
I'm not looking for trouble.
Mass Effect 2. Yeah, that still kind of stings, you know? It was 2010, everything about this game just clicked. From the moment you're picking your squad to go on the suicide mission, you felt this intense connection to everyone on board the Normandy. I can still hear Garrus's voice in my head, telling me we're either all getting out alive or nobodies. Could Red Dead Redemption really offer that? Maybe? But not in the same way anyway. It's like BioWare hit that sweet spot. They gave us more freedom in how we played, but everything about that freedom had actual consequences. I mean, nothing hurt me like losing a squad mate because I forgot to upgrade the ship's armor. That was my fault, you know? And don't even get me started on the loyalty missions. Instead of just completing quests, it became personal. Morden's loyalty mission, I found myself questioning my own morals. There are few RPGs that make you do that. Now, think about the scale of this thing. The fact that the team pulled this off right after Dragon Age Origins, with a totally different vibe going on, back to back, yeah, they were on another level here. I think part of me was bracing for it to sweep at the Game of the Year awards, but then Red Dead Redemption. Rockstar's Western world? Yeah, it was cool. It had heart too. But to me, the human aspect of Mass Effect 2, that will always stick. Maybe it reminds you of more wild moments from Mass Effect 1, the Citadel, the mysteries of the Protheans, but this had soul in every character interaction across the entire galaxy, nudging it just one step above.
The famed Geralt of Rivia. You've fallen low, Witcher. Word has it you're one of the best swordsmen in the North. Time to test that rumor.
When people hype up The Witcher 3, I get it. It's probably one of the greatest RPGs of all time. But what gets lost in that conversation is just how vital The Witcher 2 Assassins of Kings was in laying that foundation. This is where Geralt of Rivia became truly nuanced as a character. You had his classic Witcher stoicism, sure, but Witcher 2 dug into the grit of its politics, making those choices about which factions you'd back. Each choice had weight. Nothing was clean-cut, everything had a shade of moral gray to it. Kind of wild how every decision could swing the whole game, especially during that showdown between Ratchet and Yorveth. I remember debating for minutes, hands hovering over the controller, trying to figure out which one I could actually trust. Of course, it came out the same year as Skyrim, that iconic open-world juggernaut with its dragons and shouts. So, The Witcher 2's chance of sweeping awards was slim. Thing is, Skyrim was massive in every sense, but there's something about the focus in The Witcher 2 that makes it stick out. The story felt tighter, more mature. Where Skyrim dropped you into a beautifully open space to explore at your leisure, The Witcher 2 dragged you through brutal, intricate storylines where there wasn't always a neatly packaged resolution. The complexity was already brewing here. Choices that actually mattered, NPCs that remembered your decisions, relationships that shifted based on how you played Geralt. Even if Skyrim devoured the awards, Witcher 2 was this deep, complex RPG that left a permanent footprint, one that absolutely paved the road for what Witcher 3 became.
Corvo, the Empress is dead.
Her daughter Emily is hidden away, and no one will ever know the truth.
Dishonored was one of those games that quietly slid into the scene and left the floor shaking afterwards. It's wild because it's an immersive sim that gave players freedom, real, tangible freedom. Some games promise multiple playstyles, right? Dishonored didn't just promise, it committed. You could go full ghost, never being seen, silently slipping through shadows, or you could take the route of chaos, leaving bodies in your wake. Each choice genuinely affecting the world around you. Repeated playthroughs, not because you missed something, but because the game practically begged you to experiment with its systems. The blink ability still stands out for me. It was so simple, so fluid. Blink from rooftop to rooftop, taking down guards without them even realizing you were ever there. That's a feeling of power that's rare in stealth games. Then there's the atmosphere. It had this dark, almost steampunk energy with the plague-ridden city of Dunwall looming over every decision Corvo makes. It felt alive, bursting with stories of its own, without saying everything outright. The Walking Dead may have snagged awards that year, and sure, that game's narrative innovation fueled the rise of episodic storytelling, but Dishonored was different. It didn't aim to just tell a story. It wanted you to craft one. Each playthrough was yours, and you came out of it with your own personal story. Dishonored may not have earned the big awards, but it carved out a legacy through sheer design brilliance.
Hello. Hey! Knock it off! Stop it! Will you stop it?
Next up is BioShock Infinite. Let's talk about the final moments of BioShock Infinite for a second. People are still dissecting the ending to this day. Columbia was an absolute fever dream of a world. Floating cities, multiple dimensions, and layered social commentary. Where BioShock's Rapture was dark and claustrophobic in its underwater dystopia, Infinite threw open the windows of possibility, literally. We're floating above the clouds amidst this almost beatific high society soaked in early 1900s American exceptionalism. Elizabeth, your AI companion, was more than just a tag-along. She became the emotional core of the entire thing. Mechanically, it felt like the evolution of what the earlier BioShock games laid down. Vigors replaced plasmids, but the combat was still sharp, especially when you started zipping around those skylines mid-fight. I have to admit, I spent way too much time just joyriding on those things like some kind of weird roller coaster fighter pilot hybrid. The Last of Us kind of swept the award season that year, and there's no downplaying how incredible that game's emotional storytelling was. But here's a thought. Where The Last of Us was deeply grounded in its brutal, realistic world, BioShock Infinite embraced the weird. And in gaming, being weird and ambitious should always count for something. The intertwining characters, the multiverse theory at the heart of its narrative, the way Infinite explored both political and personal ideologies through Booker and Elizabeth, not many games had the guts to pull off such a dense story.
Hey! My flames are dancing. Will you dance with them?
When Shadow of Mordor came out, no one expected the Nemesis system to redefine what we thought open-world games could even do. I mean, other games had open-world enemies, but none where your enemies remembered you, hunted you down, and evolved to match you. That Uruk captain that skewered you early on, he isn't just this forgettable nobody in the background. No, now he's got a scar and a grudge, and when you face him again, it's personal. That whole system gave the world this dynamic energy. Like everything you did had ripple effects without needing some grand narrative to spell it out. In terms of its competition, Dragon Age Inquisition swooped in that year and gathered up most of the big awards. And Inquisition was great, let's not deny that. It had this sprawling fantasy landscape and characters that felt meaningful, but Shadow of Mordor? It had innovation. It felt like a game ahead of its time with what the Nemesis system was pulling off. The actual moment-to-moment combat was satisfying too, like this stylish mix of brutal slashes and fluid parkour. You felt like Talion was this unstoppable force, even though, narratively, he was just a broken dude, driven by vengeance and tied to a wraith's eternal torment. That feeling when you turn an enemy captain that's been tormenting you into a puppet assassin, nothing really felt like it. It had depth in an entirely different way than Dragon Age. Its revolution wasn't in how it told a story, but in how the gameplay itself became the story.
You're a beast hunter, aren't you? I knew it. That's precisely how I started out.
Bloodborne wasn't trying to be anyone's friend. You could feel it the moment you stepped into Yharnam. It was a place that wanted to erase you as fast as possible. And honestly, for a lot of us, that challenge was what made it unforgettable. It grabbed the DNA of Dark Souls and reworked it into this aggressive, relentless beast. The combat? Absolutely savage. Instead of hiding behind shields, you had to dive headfirst into the chaos, striking before you got overwhelmed. Now, yeah, The Witcher 3 won that year, and listen, The Witcher's narrative depth, those complex characters, that absolutely sprawling open world, hard to argue with that. But Bloodborne didn't care about sprawling. It narrowed your focus, drilling deep into this haunting, gothic atmosphere. The twisted eldritch horror that slowly crawls in the more you play, it's oppressive in a way that stays with you. Werewolves 1 minute, cosmic gods the next. Did any of us fully understand the nightmare? Probably not, but that confusion was part of the magic. Looking back, Bloodborne created one of the most unique atmospheres in gaming history, all without explaining much. The dreamlike environments, that eerie soundtrack, and its risk and reward combat system, it never lets you breathe. Maybe not as clean or epic as The Witcher 3, but for sheer pulse-pounding thrill, it left its own mark, that's for sure.
We'll set up a portal device at the tomb. Use the light poles to mark our path.
Doom 2016 dropped like a grenade. Just bam, old school thrills with a modern coat of paint. You'd think taking a classic like Doom and updating it might feel nostalgic, but no. It wasn't some love letter to the past. It rewrote the playbook for what an FPS could feel like again. Fast, violent, constantly in your face. It was like waking up after years of precise, slow, tactical shooters and suddenly just ripping through everything in your path again. You're launching yourself across the battlefield, grabbing health off demons mid-fight, daring the game to stop you. The whole glory kill system, absolutely genius. It turned the act of killing into both a way to keep yourself alive and also downright cathartic. And yeah, it lost to Overwatch for Game of the Year, which, look, I get it. Overwatch was this lighthearted, team-focused, almost accessible experience. Anyone with a group of friends could jump in and feel a part of something. But Doom, it was loud, vicious, and made you feel like a singular force of destruction. Honestly, I've always found it kind of funny that a game trying to be the next arena shooter took down what's probably the best modern arena shooter that no one expected to work. But Doom, it brought that pure, arcade-like FPS combat back to the forefront. A brutal reminder that shooters could be more than cover mechanics and reloading. It invited you to be reckless. And let's be real, sometimes that's exactly what you need. The fact it got edged out, it's almost ironic. Overwatch danced around Doom's legacy, but Doom 2016 said, nah, let's get our hands dirty again.
Outlander. Aloy, hey, you're alive. I thought you were dead. Make way, make way.
All the way to Meridian just to see me?
Next up is Horizon Zero Dawn. Now, here's the thing about Horizon Zero Dawn. People always talk about how Breath of the Wild dropped the same year and just stole all the spotlight, but honestly, imagine if Horizon had come out, I don't know, even a year earlier. Completely different story. Aloy had everything going for her. This really cool, rugged open world with these robot dinosaurs that could stomp you into next week if you weren't careful. I mean, come on. Remember that first time you took on a Thunderjaw? The dread, the size of it, the entire thrill of barely surviving. That's one of those gaming moments that sticks. It wasn't just the gameplay though. The story had layers. You had this mystery of a post-apocalyptic world decimated by machines, and hidden right beneath the surface was this nuanced tale of humanity's hubris, technology gone wrong. And Aloy, as a character, her curiosity, her determination to find out where she came from, that really hit home for me. The whole arc had heart. I still think Horizon deserved more than it got. The tragically ironic thing is, the game's biggest strength, its visuals, got outshined by Breath of the Wild's bold choice of simplicity. Like, the best realism doesn't always mean the best world. The argument boils down to realism versus charm, right? Sometimes minimalistic beauty just hits harder than detail for detail realism. But to overlook what Horizon Zero Dawn brought, just because it dropped in a year where Zelda arrived like a bolt of lightning, feels like it should have had its moment.
All right, come on.
You okay, partner?
Up next, we have Red Dead Redemption 2. I don't think I've ever been in a game world that felt more lived in than the Wild West of Red Dead Redemption 2. Like, I'm out here skinning coyotes and riding through torrential rain, and I almost forget it's a man-made space. Rockstar built this thing like a world you could exist in. And Arthur, easily one of the best protagonist arcs I've seen in a long while. Not just in games, but in storytelling, period. The gruff outlaw laced with tragic humanity. The whole world clings around your decisions, and that pacing. Everyone talks about the slow pacing like it's a bad thing. It forced you to sink into the world's rhythm. Of course, some just couldn't vibe with the slower, meditative heartbeat of Red Dead after God of War's more direct, punchy action. Kratos definitely had weight behind those Leviathan axe swings, but Arthur had this quiet inner struggle that lingered past gameplay. It's the little things too, like when you spot the way characters interact differently based on how long it's been since you've bathed, or how townsfolk remember your past decisions. I'm not saying games should take their time, but no one really does it like this anymore. Maybe it was up against God of War, which also had a generational character journey in Kratos and Atreus, but Red Dead Redemption 2 had its own generational journey too, just messier and more unpredictable, like life itself. I don't know about you, but the slower pacing gave more time for those gut punch character moments to marinate.
America. Reconstructionism. Her dream isn't dead.
I don't want to hear it.
This is the face of our new hope.
Okay, so Death Stranding. What even was this game? When it dropped, I think nobody really knew what to expect, and that's peak Kojima, right? The guy thrives on confusing and surprising people. Right from the first trailer, you get a sense that this wasn't going to be a standard gaming experience. Carving a genre out of thin air, it became this mix of delivery work, survival, and social experiment. That sounds wild, but then you play it and it clicks little by little. I mean, connecting the world piece by piece through literal deliveries while being stalked by these ghostly BT creatures? Intense, especially when you're out there alone, trudging through the rain while creepy skeletal things float overhead. Now, it came out the same year Sekiro snagged the Game of the Year award, which was all about precise, punishing combat and that wild, shinobi-flavored rhythm. But Death Stranding wasn't playing the same game. It slowed you down intentionally. It put you in nature, between mountains and rivers, all while giving you the time to reflect on isolation, something no other game really tries to do. Some people didn't get it, and I get that, but there was something majestic in the weirdness. The sheer intention behind things like multiplayer, where players can leave each other ladders and signs without ever meeting, showed this brilliant slow burn mechanic. Honestly, do you ever think about how Death Stranding tapped into that theme of connection in a way that still feels relevant today? It wasn't about conquering or slashing through hordes. It was about rebuilding. Kojima made something that lingered long after the credits rolled. When Ghost of Tsushima hit shelves in 2020, it was like cracking open a book full of old samurai films. Every frame felt like a love letter to that classic era of honor, revenge, and quiet strength. Sucker Punch really caught everyone off guard with the sheer sweep of the world. Running through golden fields, under the cherry blossoms, then shifting to these intense one-on-one standoffs where you're sizing each other up, waiting for just the right moment to strike. The vibe was almost meditative, like each slash of your sword meant something. But then, up against The Last of Us Part 2, I get it. The Last of Us Part 2 was a masterclass in emotional storytelling, pushing boundaries and making you question everything about characters you'd loved for years. But you know what? Ghost of Tsushima, in so many ways, was a breath of fresh air because it felt like its own legend, directing the story as Jin walked the tightrope between honor and necessity. It wasn't just about being a samurai, it was about becoming something more, or something less, depending on your view of Jin's choices. Also, can we please talk about the atmosphere? The Kurosawa mode was cool, sure, but I honestly spent a ton of time just soaking in the color. The wind guiding your path, no minimap, just nature itself pointing the way. Genius. It felt alive without crowding the screen with HUD elements. End of the day, while The Last of Us Part 2 had weighty drama, Ghost of Tsushima was like a beautiful haiku in motion, each step bringing you closer to the heart of that samurai code.
Clank? Clank? Wombats? What is this place?
Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart was pure spectacle. I mean, you play that intro, jumping between dimensions mid-combat, and the first thing that comes to mind is, how'd they even do this? The seamlessness of hopping through worlds was flashy on its own, but what really amazed me was how effortlessly fun it all felt. There's never a boring moment. 1 second you're in a cyberpunk city, and the next, you're in some prehistoric wasteland fighting off mechanical dinosaurs. You almost just wanted to stop and stare every time you hit a new rift. The PS5 tech really shined here. I couldn't even picture something like that being possible on older systems, you know? Now, It Takes Two won the crown that year, and honestly, that game was brilliant for its cooperative storytelling and all the quirky, imaginative mechanics it brought. Like, no hate there. It was fun in a way that we don't often get to see from AAA titles. Rift Apart, though, it's kind of the epitome of a different sort of fun. Colorful, bombastic, clean. Its heart is in that classic Ratchet and Clank humor tied together with some genuinely emotional punch. Rivet, the newcomer, added a dynamic shift. She wasn't just a female counterpart, she expanded on the universe in a meaningful way, which I really appreciated. By the time you finish, you just know you've been on this big, mind-bending adventure. Maybe it lost to It Takes Two, but you leave Rift Apart with that undeniable feeling of having just gone on a wild ride across universes, no questions asked.
Mother, you must stop this. We don't know this man.
Amicia, this sort of thing was always likely.
Up next is A Plague Tale Requiem. I don't think we talk enough about how A Plague Tale Requiem really poured its heart into that story of survival. Unlike a lot of big-name, narrative-driven games, it wasn't about being the hero or saving the world. It zoomed in on the close-knit bond between Amicia and Hugo, making it feel so personal. And in Requiem, wow, you really see how far Amicia will go to protect her little brother. There's this palpable desperation in every step they take, every decision. You just feel their exhaustion, their fear. Now, up against something like Elden Ring, Requiem didn't particularly have a fighting chance. I mean, we're talking about two completely different beasts. Elden Ring created this massive, sprawling, mysterious world that let you lose yourself for hours. Meanwhile, Requiem was more focused, more intimate. It didn't have dragons or ancient gods, but it had those swarms. And let me tell you, when those rats flooded every corner, seeping out of the shadows, I was on edge the whole time. Their evolution from the first game just made everything feel darker, more hopeless. What made Requiem truly stand out, though, wasn't just the atmosphere. It was the way the game balanced its stealth action gameplay with the emotion seeping through. Every swing of the sling, every step through a rat-infested village tied back to Amicia's deep, unwavering love for Hugo. Requiem may not have had the spectacle of Elden Ring, but in its quieter moments, in that sheer weight of story, it grabbed something visceral. That's why it lingers.
Oh, you gotta be kidding me.
Resident Evil 4 Remake. I mean, it was a nearly flawless remake. Capcom somehow managed to modernize a game we all thought didn't need it. But man, when this version dropped, it was like seeing the classic with fresh eyes. The updated visuals, the tighter gunplay, the way they reimagined crowd control during combat, everything felt right. You've still got Leon, still that iconic village opening with the chainsaw guy charging at you, but it all felt more intense, more relentless. Now, Baldur's Gate 3 was that sprawling RPG titan in the same year. A massive choice-driven experience with layers upon layers of narrative. So sure, maybe it's hard to compete with something that sprawling. But what Resident Evil 4 did was so different. It was precise. Every enemy encounter was handled with surgical precision. Every small upgrade to mechanics mattered. Capcom didn't just give us a nostalgia hit, they made a game that truly feels new, despite the source material being nearly 2 decades old. It's also weirdly impressive how they overhauled the horror while keeping the campy tone. Ashley's not annoying anymore, and Leon's one-liners still land, giving those moments of relief in the middle of all the chaos. So yeah, even with Baldur's Gate 3 taking the Game of the Year title, Resident Evil 4 Remake stands as undeniably one of the best evolutions of survival horror. It's like a time machine for anyone who loved the original, but also offers enough for newcomers to jump in. If you've got a favorite that didn't make the cut, drop it in the comments. I'd love to hear what games hit you the hardest. And hey, if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching.